I think we can start, Sheila. What do you think?
I think that's good. I think you've got a pretty good group now.
Okay, awesome. Do you want me to start or do you want to talk about ISTF Global or?
Okay, I'll just say welcome to everybody. This webinar is being offered by ISTF chapter at North Carolina State University in collaboration with ISTF Global. And we are an international organization with about 2,800 members in 130 countries around the world. And I'll turn it over to Alejandra Betancourt who will be the moderator for this session. Thank you, Alejandra, and everybody who's presenting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. So, hi everyone. I am Alejandra Betancourt. I am a PhD candidate in the Forestry and Environmental Resources Department here at North Carolina State University. And I am really excited for this webinar. I hope that this becomes at least an annual event, helping connect people, not only here in the Research Triangle in North Carolina, but also worldwide with others who care about and work in tropical ecosystems. So thank you all for taking the time to join us, and thanks to our speakers for accepting the invitation. So this session is being recorded so we can share it in the ISTF Global YouTube channel and keep it for future reference. So today we have 4 speakers. 3 are from North Carolina State, from the same college that I am, that is Natural Resource, and 1 invited from Duke University. So each will present for about 10 to 13 minutes, followed by an open discussion and Q&A. But first, I would like to briefly describe or introduce a little ISTF at North Carolina State and what we do. We are part of the ISTF Global as one chapter that there are 3, I believe, in the United States, 1 in Yale in Connecticut, 1 here in NC State, and 1 in Puerto Rico, I believe. But we are also a graduate student-led organization that's been reactive since 2023, working to bring back the activities this group used to do at NC State before COVID. So we are trying to create space where people can learn about tropical forests, what it's like to work with them, and the related factors that shape and influence them, the opportunities and the challenge that bring working with tropical forests. So we have 3 main goals in our vision as a chapter that is connect students through informal talks on tropical forests and related topics. But we also want to create welcoming spaces for open learning and discussions. And we also share a resource and opportunity with a network of members. All of our presenters today work in tropical forests from complementary angles, connecting ecology with human system, from governance and carbon markets to remote sensing, community forestry, reforestation that balance environmental and livelihood outcomes. But I'm not going to take any more time from them, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and present their work and experiences and talk about the challenge and opportunity that brings working with tropical forests. So to start, I want to bring Ana Cubas to share about her work. So thank you, everybody. I give you the screen, Ana.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alejandra, for that introduction. I will share my screen first. Just a moment. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, it's showing up with the notes page again, but I think maybe you'll be okay.
You click the when you put the presentation, click show presenter viewer.
Okay. Now, no?
Yes.
Show presenter view. Do you still see the notes?
No.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation of this webinar. And my name is Ana Cubas-Baez. I recently defended my PhD dissertation and earned my Ph.D. in Forestry and Environmental Resources. And today I will be briefly sharing with you my work in tropical forests and experiences and some lessons learned during these years of work. But to begin, I want to step back and talk a little bit about why this topic matters. So forest covers about 31% of the world's land area, and tropical forests have the largest share of global forest worldwide. And as we all know, they provide essential forest products and ecosystem services. But despite this importance, forests continue to be lost around the world. In this map, we can see the annual forest area net change over time. While there are varied patterns that vary across regions, we can see here that the major forest loss remains a major challenge, especially in the tropical region of the world. So in this map, I am showing the deforestation in the Paraguayan Chaco, where I am from. So this region of Paraguay has experienced one of the highest deforestation rate in the world in the past decade. So this makes these challenges affecting not only the biodiversity, but also the people who depend on forests. So to move into my journey to tropical forests, I begin my journey in Paraguay, where I am from, which is a small, beautiful country in the center of South America, where I grew up connected with forests and natural resources. There I was trained as a forestry engineer. It is also where I had my very early experiences in forestry. And also during my undergrad and my early professional experience, I had the opportunity to work on forest carbon projects, working with people, local communities, indigenous communities in forest conservation. And that experience, those experiences shaped my vision of the importance of forests and how people use them, protect them, and also how they highly depend on them. So that motivation or that curiosity for natural resources and forests, especially tropical forests, led me to pursue my academic journey. So I came to the US to do a master's degree in natural resources, and then I continue as a PhD student at North Carolina State University. So this academic journey gave me the tools and the knowledge and the connections to explore broader questions about tropical forests, climate solutions, and the people who depend on them. So more specifically, my research focus sits at the intersection of tropical forests, climate solutions, and people. And the combination of these three main topics leads to the question, kind of the broader question that guides my research, which is how can tropical forest climate solutions be designed and implemented in ways that not only support forest conservation, but also support the people who depend on them. So one important pathway I study is RED, which stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation, plus the role of conservation, sustainable forest management, and enhancement of forest carbon stocks. It is an initiative that was first proposed in 2005 at the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, and it has been proposed as a forest-based climate solution with the potential to mitigate climate change, conserve forests, but also to provide economic and social benefits to local people who depend on them. However, after more than a decade that RED was first proposed and implemented, there are still many challenges, which are showed in a lot of great literature and peer-reviewed literature, especially in tropical forests with large forest areas like in Brazil and Indonesia. And these challenges are centered around overstated emission reductions of carbon projects, inequitable benefit sharing, especially to local communities, land tenure and rights, where these initiatives are implemented in sites with challenging land tenure and rights. And lastly, climate injustices that still remain until today. So understanding all these challenges is important to examine who participates, who benefits, and whether RED efforts can be effective, fair, and sustainable. And to understand these challenges more clearly, I turn into two case studies from my own research. So my first case study is RED in the Peruvian Amazon. This was part of my master's research, in which I used data from a global comparative study on RED, led by the CIFOR, or the Center for International Forestry Research. So using survey data, I examined how households perceive the impacts of RED, especially on local well-being. And this study highlighted the importance of understanding climate mitigation through local lens, specifically through the perceptions of households and families who participate in RED projects. My second case study is RED across 3 countries. This study was part of my PhD dissertation. The study areas were 3 countries in the Global South, Nepal, Paraguay, and Guatemala. So I used qualitative interviews to explore perceptions of RED stakeholders across sectors and countries. So I wanted to understand how RED was understood and experiences in different national contexts. So this study generated insights into the main challenges that remain of RED, especially considering the complexity of RED and, for example, low carbon prices worldwide, as well as the opportunities shaping RED that are financial incentive for conservation, and how all these challenges and opportunities shape the design and implementation of RED. So during these years, and working on research related to RED and with local and indigenous communities participating on RED, I learned a few lessons that I wanted to share with you today. So the first one is that local context matters. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, especially considering tropical forests. And it is very important that these solutions are locally rounded and meaningful to local people. Local communities are a central part, or must be a central part. They are not just beneficiaries, but are also partners in protecting forests. Aspects related to trust and participation matter. Lasting and sustainable solutions depend on cooperation and inclusion. And lastly, there is value in the use of mixed methods research, considering both numbers or quantitative research and lived experiences that could be like interviews and talking to people. So the combination of these two approaches reveal a more complete story on what is really happening on the ground. So with that, I finish my presentation, and thank you. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ana, so much. Thank you for the presentation. Now we are moving forward with Sheila Booker, and I remember that I remind everybody that we're going to save the questions for the discussions at the end. So Sheila, I invite you to present. Thank you. You are muted, Sheila.
Oh, sorry. Can you see my screen now without note? Okay, thank you. Okay, hello everybody. I am Sheila Booker-Rial, PhD student in the Department of Forestry and Environmental Resources. Today I'll be discussing about the drought sensitivity in the Tarai Arc landscape of Nepal. These are some pictures from my job role in Nepal. I was monitoring and forest officer in Federation of Community Forest User Groups, and also now I'm senior forest officer in the Ministry of Forest and Environment, Government of Nepal. I want to start with some introduction of forest types in Nepal. There are actually two classification approach. One is based on management goal and ownership. At least you may have heard about the community forestry program, which is really famous worldwide. And around 35% of the forest area in Nepal is handed over to community forest user group. And there are other state-driven forest and privately owned forest as well. Here is another forest types based on ecological zone. Nepal has tropical to alpine forest, and the map shows the distribution of forest types across the country. You can see the concentration of different species from broadleaf forest in the tropical region to the coniferous and mixed forest at higher altitude, which forms a complex mosaic. And this is the summary statistics of forest in tropical region of Nepal. And there is around 45% total forest cover in Nepal. And in Tarai, it covers around 20% of forest, and it has around 69 teragram of total carbon. And there are 241 million stems in the tropical region of Nepal. And these are other key features of Tarai Arc landscape in Nepal. This landscape is renowned for agricultural hard, which contain over 55% of its cultivated land. And it is also characterized by hot monsoon and extreme dry heat up to 41 degrees Celsius and heavy rainfall in the monsoon season. And this landscape is considered as one of the highly biodiverse landscape in Nepal for critical and endangered flora and fauna species. And it constitutes 7 protected areas, including Chitwan National Park and Bardia National Park, with mega and flagship species like greater one horned rhino and Bengal tiger. And this is the actual study area that I used for my study. And Tarai Arc landscape is composed of tropical region and subtropical region in Nepal. And you can see the elevation ranges from around 60 meter to around 2000 meter. And the major forest types are needleleaf forest, broadleaf evergreen forest, and broadleaf deciduous forest. Here I start with my research. First, I want to start with this opening question. Like, we believe that hard times make people stronger. Then what about trees? Do you believe hard times make stronger trees? Like, trees growing in ideal growing condition versus trees growing in adverse growing condition. For example, dense forest versus sparse forest, and trees in drier topographic position versus tree in wetter topographic position. And similarly, trees experiencing severe past drought experience versus tree with no past drought experience, and tree with frequent drought versus tree with rare droughts. And these conditions may behave differently for different tree species. And I am really curious to explore this research question. Yeah, this is the research context. As we all know, drought is a growing climate threat, but vegetation responses are poorly understood, especially in this study region. And vegetation respond to drought across distinct time scale, ranging from few days to several years, which is based on biome types. And trees experience drought differently depending on their structure and the environmental condition. For example, forest types, tree cover density, and other topographical features. And trees with past drought exposure may develop, for example, resilience or fatigue, which may influence the future drought response. These are the three governing research questions that I'm trying to address from this study. The very first question is, how long does the vegetation take to respond to the drought? And which forest and in what environmental conditions are more drought sensitive or more drought resistant? And the third question is, are the trees growing in moisture limited conditions or those exposed to severe past drought more resilient and recover quickly? And here is the methodological framework I have used. First, I identify the best time scale that vegetation shows the effect of drought. I use normalized difference vegetation index and standardized precipitation evapotranspiration index. The normalized vegetation difference vegetation index in simple term refer to the vegetation health index based on photosynthetic capacity of the vegetation, and it is satellite measure numerical value. Higher NDVI value means a good health and dense forest, and value towards 0 and -1 indicate no forest or dead forest. And SPI is a multi-scalar drought index or water balance index, which is used to monitor drought condition. The negative value indicates drought or water deficit condition, while the positive value indicates wetter condition. And I do Pearson correlation analysis between NDVI and SPI to find out the best time scale. In this case, I found that 1 month of NDVI based show the effect of drought in 3 months. So I choose monthly NDVI and 3 months of SPI for the further study. Then I do modeling to understand how drought sensitivity vary across the environmental gradients using the predictor tree cover density, forest types, and topographic moisture gradient. Then I identify drought events using Ron theory. The number, duration, the severity, the time interval of the drought. The Ron theory means I used the SPI value less than -1, which indicates the moderate drought situation, and at least for 2 months that consecutive moderate drought condition. Then I calculate the drought metrics, resistance, resilience, and recovery time to test the hypothesis hard times make strong trees using those severity, intensity, duration, previous severity, and time interval. And this is the definition for drought metrics. You can see here is the pre-drought baseline condition, and this is the drought event. And in this drought event, if the NDVI value drops high, then it is considered weak resistance. And if only drops low, then we call it high resistance. Then resilience is the ability to bounce back to its original state after being altered by a disturbance. And recovery time is the duration required for a system to return to its pre-disturbance stage here, from here to here. This is the spatial distribution of drought sensitivity in the Tarai arc landscape of Nepal. Here, the darker blue color indicate higher positive correlation, means higher drought sensitivity. It means when there is wetter condition, there is no drought, the NDVI anomaly or vegetation greenness increases than the normal situation. The value near 0 indicates more resistant condition, and the red color or negative value indicates negative correlation, and it means even though there is drought, the NDVI may go up and vice versa. And this is the result for the model to understand drought sensitivity across the environmental gradients. And you can see in the x-axis, the tree cover density. I have excluded the forest area below 40% tree cover density to exclude the noise from other land use types. And you can see the red line shows the drier topographic position, and the blue line shows the wetter topographic position. And if you see in the plot, we can see that with the increasing tree cover density, the drought sensitivity increases in all forest types. And that sensitivity is severely exaggerated in the dry condition, except in broadleaf deciduous forest. But in broadleaf deciduous forest, in the drier situation, if there is high tree cover density, it is somehow beneficial. Here is the drought matrix across the drought sensitivity severity class. And if we move from moderate to extreme drought condition, vegetation's resistance and resilience decline with the increased severity. And similarly, the mean recovery time increases as the drought becomes more severe. And this result illustrates the ecological memory in Nepal's Tal forest. It shows that forest ability to survive today depend on two factors. First, how bad the previous drought was and how much rest time it had to recover. Here the rest period refers to the time interval between the previous drought event to the next drought events. You can see here the different spectrum. The light yellow color represent the lower severity, and the darker one shows the higher severity. And you may have noticed the X shape in every graph. If a forest has less than 3 years of rest, previous severe drought make it fragile and slow to recover. But if given more than 3 years of rest, those same traumatized forests actually become tougher and more resistant than forests that never experienced a severe drought. Simply, we can say if drought hit more often than every 3 years, the forest memory leads to collapse. If they hit less often, the forest memory actually builds climate adaptation. Here, based on these findings, I have made 2 recommendations. And then we need to think about transitioning from passive planting to active engineering. The default conservation instinct assumes that increasing tree density usually increase the ecosystem services, like in strict protected forest and strict protected area. But from our study, we see that in the steep dry terrains of the Tal, high density canopies are severe liabilities during drought. So forest policy must allow for active management and strategic thinning in vulnerable topographic regions to reduce the water competition and ensure the overall ecosystem survival. Here is another recommendation, the 40-month rule for defining high-risk ecological zone. So policy makers must track not just the current rainfall and meteorological data, but the precise chronological interval since the last major drought events. The data proves that ecosystem recovering from severe events require extended period of rest, like around 3 years. So the actionable mandate is any forest sector within the Tal operating under a 40-month recovery window must be immediately classified as a high risk zone on national dashboard and triggering preemptive conservation protocols regardless of current seasonal weather. So this is the key takeaway from my study. So we need to think about transitioning from reactive conservation to proactive ecological engineering. We know Nepal's tropical forests are majestic, but they are not invulnerable to a changing climate. So by understanding their ecological memory and recognizing the density paradox, we can shift from passively reacting to canopy die-off to actively engaging their survival. And thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll be happy to answer if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you so much for the presentation. And we're going to move forward with Laura.
Sure, thank you. So I'm gonna share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I am Laura Arango. Thank you for having me here. I'm also part of the ISTF team. I'm a PhD candidate at NC State University at Forestry and Environmental Resources. And today I want to share with you a little bit of my PhD research and what this interdisciplinary team that I'm working with have been doing in Oaxaca, Mexico. But first, give me a second. Sorry, I cannot see my. I'm still sharing? No.
No, you stop sharing your screen.
I'm sorry.
You're good. Now it's almost sharing. Now you have the screen.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what our interdisciplinary team has been doing in Oaxaca, Mexico. But first, where Oaxaca is located, this is in the southeastern Mexico, and it is a global biodiversity hotspot with high endemisms, hosting endangered and threatened species such as merguy, puma, eastern spot skunk, Mexican bay leaf, different type of fir, and so on. Also here in Oaxaca, we can find like a huge diversity of different ecosystems type, ranging from cloud and pine oak to dry oak, tropical dry, and evergreen types. Also, we can find like temperate forests, where actually I'm working in with high levels of endemism in terms of pine and oak species. However, like those ecosystems are facing threats from climate change, illegal logging, poaching, agricultural expansion, and oil migration. Here in Oaxaca, with the 76% of the state under communal, like indigenous and peasant ownership, there is a framework that integrating like traditional knowledge with diverse livelihoods, for example, coffee, agroforestry in the south part of Mexico, of Oaxaca, or timber production in the north part of Oaxaca, and ecological management. We can create solutions to safeguarding wildlife and sustaining Oaxaca unique forests across multiple endemic ethnic groups, like we have Zapotec, Mixtec, Mijes, and so on. So the huge diversity in terms of plants, animals, and cultural, it's amazing. So as I mentioned before, we are an interdisciplinary team. So since the beginning of my research, I have had the great opportunity to work really close with ISICO, that is the Integrador of Indigenous and Campesino Communities of Oaxaca. This is a Mexican civil society organization that has more than 20 years of experience, like working with 16 indigenous communities, supporting them like in different topics around conservation, sustainable management, carbon credits, across more than 60,000 of hectares of diverse communally management lands. We also are working really close to Duke University with different professors, students through different projects, UBC University at Vancouver, Canada, Seattle University. And this like diverse team that we have can bring opportunities to enrich our discussions and also to bring like different collaborators on the ground. Because we are an interdisciplinary team, we have many like research areas. So the first one is wildlife monitoring, biological corridors. So this is amazing. And some questions that are coming up with this research area is like, how do species richness and community composition change between management and unmanagement forest areas? So right now we are working with two communities in Sierra Norte with Abejones and Jaltianguis. So through different monitoring workshops that took place in those communities, we learned how to use like different tools and strategies to monitoring wildlife. So right now they are implementing and setting up like camera strap to monitoring mammals and also passive acoustic monitoring for birds. So here you can see puma, ocelot, so diversity that we have there, it's amazing. Another area its livelihoods and land use in forest communities in Oaxaca, because those have changed over time. So we want to see if different programs such as ecosystem services, payment for ecosystem services, and cattle credits can or not strengthen community forest management while increasing economic and social benefits. So for those one, like different cartography workshop, interviews with the community have been conducted. And the last one that I'm part of is the silviculture and forest ecology research team. And here, like the main topic, it's around community forest management in Sierra Norte of Oaxaca. So here, what we want to do is to examine and also assess the impacts that community forest management can have on biodiversity and forest structure through multiple lenses. Also, with the community, we want to co-create like different methods to improve the management for timber production and ecosystem services, and to enhance forest resilience to climate change. Just one thing to highlight, as you can see here, like the pictures of the different species, those are the species that the communities are planting or are using for restoration. So we have Pinus oaxacana, Pinus ayacahuite, Pinus patula, different from the one that we have here in the United States, Pinus eustrobus. All those species are endemic from the region, and they are the ones that are using for timber. With that information, also we want to assess like the different effects of climate change on these three species distribution, so we can project those distribution over time. More specifically, we are doing this community forest management assessment in one community, that is Santa Maria y Jaltianguis. So we want to know locally actually what is happening, so we can replicate and adapt strategies to another places. So why Santa Maria y Jaltianguis? So since the beginning, when I start talking with them through different discussions, they shared with us that there is a huge interest on learning how the community forest management, like their management plan that they are using right now, can be aligned with other objectives. So right now, it's not just about how to produce a good timber, a good quality of timber or pine regeneration, but also how through this management, they can have like more biodiverse stand that also supports wildlife. Another thing is that they want to have tree inventory data across different land use types to know what is happening, like which species they have in their management area, but also in the unmanagement area, so we can have a better picture of their forest biodiversity. And the last one is that right now, this community is implemented their third management plan, which is different from the previous one, because the silvicultural treatment that they are using is group selection system. For the previous one, they were using single selection system. So there is no data on how effective this group selection system is for the community, for the biodiversity. So they want to have actually numbers and to see what's going on with this silvicultural treatment and how effective it is. This is important also because it has been raising like some concerns due to large visible openings. So if you check the picture that is up, you can see a big opening there. So people from the community are really concerned, like, hey, what is going on with the forest? So the engineering, the local authorities, they want to show like, no worries, something good is going to happen. So this is why we are working with them. About like some like main results that we have found here so far is like, sure, we have a high species richness across the management and also unmanagement areas, but the evenness and the species composition is different. So through Shannon Index and better biodiversity analysis, we found that this landscape is very heterogeneous, which is really good because we can have a resilience forests in a long term. We found 33 different tree species, 15 genera, 13 families, high levels of oak species, 11 species, and 7 species of pine. most of them endemic either for the region or for the country. And because it is not just about timber, but also how it can bring like biodiversity on the stand, we include like another variable in our data collection that it was orchids, because community, they don't have information about the species that they have, and this is important, like an important cultural species for them. So we also want to collect information about it, which is here, pictures that I'm showing in this slide. There are some orchids that we found. But this first, Ricostele aptera, this is a pretty cool one because this is associated with a pine. Most of the orchids are associated, or the tree hosts are quercus, oaks, or other species, but not pines. But this one, Ricostele aptera, it's associated with the pine, which is actually pretty cool. Yeah, so through different models that we run, we also want to see like how different environmental variables like altitude, temperature, slope, aspect actually affect richness and abundance in the forest. And we found that the species richness is more higher in northwest facing aspects and declines slightly with a slope and elevation. And that information is pretty useful because they can inform us like where we should plant which species and how, when and what, yeah. Also, we found the active restoration, it's important here. So for example, in our management areas, pines mainly occur in canopy and not in regeneration. So as we saw, like pine species are important not only for timber because their economy is based on that, but also because those can be associated to other species like orchids. So actually like creating canopy openings support the natural regeneration of those species, which means that the patch cut selection system that they are using right now actually is promoting pine dominance, but also having other species. Yeah, and those, with all that information, also we can create like a species distribution model and to project them for future and to have like more informed decisions on where to plant and where and how to plant like different species to be successful. So these findings also can inform sustainable forest management and timber practices to have a more biodiverse forest in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Laura, for your presentation. And now, Danny, I will give you the screen to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Can you see my screen? Great. Well, thank you for having me, and it's been great to hear the other speakers' presentations. My presentation, my work is a little bit different than all of yours in that I'm a quantitative social scientist instead of a forest scientist, but I rely on all of you to make sure that I'm saying things that are sensible about how forests work when I'm talking about how tree planting on private land can relate to the creation of new forest and ecosystem services. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about some work that we did in southern India. And specifically, we're thinking a lot about what drives tree planting preferences on smallholder farms. This is important because a lot of the potential for restoring forests through afforestation or reforestation is in the global south, and in the areas of the global south, many of the available plots are on smallholder farms. And at the same time, smallholders basically have the most to gain from carbon programs, so long as carbon programs are income improving. So if we think that carbon credits can increase income, we want to make sure that the people that are most vulnerable, that have smaller amounts of land, that they're included. So in this landscape, one of the things that characterizes it is a really sharp boundary between the protected forest and cropland. And that means that there's high amounts of human-wildlife conflict. It also means that there's fragmentation of the forest, which this was a program that was run with the Center for Wildlife Studies in India, and so one of the goals was to connect different patches of the forest through tree planting on private lands. So this is a general area of where we ran our study. The map on the left shows the different types of data collection that we did, whereas the map on the right is a little bit more specific about the type of randomization that we did in one of the studies to get a representative sample. Basically, we're in the study that I'm going to talk about most. We did a discrete choice experiment where farmers were given hypothetical options of types of trees that they would want to plant, and they responded to them, and then we ran some statistics to try to understand their preferences. But we also were able to collect multiple rounds of data of farmers who were offered real tree planting options and then tried to understand their responses. So the map on the right just shows how we get the representative sample through randomized grids. So this is what we were talking about. We basically we thought about the different ways that this program could be designed. There was kind of the ecologically preferred way to do tree planting, which was provide a mix of species that simulated forest, but with some benefits of having some provide fruit, some provide timber, some provide medicinal, and then have it in a cluster that was along the boundary closer to the forest. However, that contrasts to what farmers mostly do in this landscape already of the ones that plant trees, which is planting on the boundary, mostly timber species. And so what we did is we used an algorithm to create what are called choice cards, which is what you see on the right, where we ask farmers a number of different times, would you take option 1, which in this case shows timber on the boundary, option 2, which in this case shows fruit orchard, or no option, and continue to do what you're doing. And we also have a component about payment for environmental services timing, but that wasn't something that ended up farmers responding to because we kept the amount that people would receive constant, and we just varied the timing, and that didn't seem to matter to people. Whereas we had people say whether or not they would pay for trees in this program, and varied that from 0 rupees per tree to 30 rupees per tree. So one of the things that we first did is we wanted to know which factors were associated with farmers opting in or opting out across different types of offers. And so we see that farmers with more agricultural investment, things like irrigation sprinklers, having a higher income, being more educated, these are all associated with them opting in and being more interested in tree planting in this specific study. We also see that more favorable biophysical connections like lower land surface temperature and higher precipitation was correlated with them opting in, whereas the opposite was true for opting out. Older farmers actually opted out more often, and people in areas that were dry, hot, and less green opted out more often. The next thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to see what was the comparison between how much someone would need to be compensated to plant forest on the boundary versus other types of tree patterns, tree configurations. So the mixed cluster, again, was the kind of the ecologically preferred thing that the NGO wanted to do. We saw some farmers in the landscape did fruit intercropping. Mixed boundary was a mix of trees, but planted on the boundary, and then fruit boundary was just fruit trees, but planted on the boundary. And so basically what we see is that farmers would need to be compensated a lot this is anything above the dot line shows the amount that they need to be paid, the inverse of the down payment to go from a timber boundary planting to mixed cluster and to be equally well off. Interestingly, though, farmers would be pretty willing to plant mixed boundary without much compensation. So that shows that you can get some improvements in terms of tree biodiversity by providing species. And it may be that people are planting just timber on the boundary because that's what the forest department, for instance, was providing. But to get these blocks of mixed trees, people would need to be compensated quite a bit. Now, the next thing that we did is we looked at how these patterns shifted in response to different factors. And one of the interesting results was around the effect of wildlife conflict. We see that people without wildlife conflict, they would be more willing to plant forest-like tree planting. And then we saw a really strong effect across different models of people being really adverse to wildlife conflict, to fruit on the boundary because of wildlife conflict. So that just shows that people were worried about fruit on the boundary of their plot, bringing animals to the plot and then disturbing property and their other crops that they're growing. And this is from another model, but we found again this effect of when farmers were close to the national park and when they had previous wildlife conflict, they really disliked fruit on the boundary, and they liked timber on the boundary a little bit more in this model, which we heard from some farmers that they had the sense that maybe timber on the boundary would shield their plots. So moving from the stated preferences where farmers react to these hypothetical offers to real preferences, we saw in the first year of adoption data some interesting patterns that actually varied quite a bit across time and space. But one of the things that's interesting to note is that the factors that relate to farmers saying, yes, I'll take some trees versus yes, I'll take lots of trees are different. And you can even see this with education, where we in the first year of the study, that people were with more education, they were less likely to take any trees. But once they took some trees, conditioning on those group, the ones that with higher education, they would take more trees. And so you can kind of understand that as well as reflecting something like if you have higher education, maybe your opportunity cost, to use an economics term, but the cost of doing something different might be higher. You already have a really well set up system. You don't want to put trees in your system, but the people that are willing to, they can move more aggressively into a new system. All of this together led us to kind of a final point, which is that it might be quite good to, instead of targeting different offers to different farmers, to allow for farmers to choose, but to do this with compensating things that are more ecologically beneficial. So here we have an example of where we might want to still have offers to plant timber on the boundary because that could be good for carbon. But if we want biodiversity, we might want to promote something like the mixed cluster bound instead of the boundaries, and pay farmers a higher amount for that based on tree survival. So because it was very hard to detect which farmers would be more interested in one type of tree planting over another based on these observable factors, we could find that there was what we call heterogeneity, really lots of variation in preferences, but it was very hard to group that based on any one factor. We suggest that allowing farmers to self-select might be more efficient. And so that's the research that I have to present today, and I'm glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. So thank you to the four speakers today. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And we are now open for discussion and questions that you have for speakers. You can put them on the chat or open your mic and ask. In the meantime, while I give you time for that, we have one that state for any of the participant speakers. What are the biggest challenge that you have encountered working with tropical forests from an academic perspective as a grad student? So anyone who wants to answer is open.
I can start.
Mhm.
I don't know if that is a question for all of us or, well, but
Yes.
I can
Well,
start.
yeah, who wants to answer? Apparently, yeah.
Well, when I think about challenges, I think for me at this point are more like lessons learned along the way. I will say that the complexity of tropical forests themselves, it is important to start with that. It is a challenge, but also a very good learning experience for me. In terms of understanding and capturing all the local perspectives, specifically for my research. And also in terms of fieldwork, I did like fieldwork in different countries. So that means also different context, different perspectives, to be respectful and humble about local realities, and also that process of building trust that also takes time when working with communities or with people in general. So that will be the main challenge, but also, like as I mentioned, like many lessons learned, like to be flexible, to be resourceful, to be patient, and to value this interdisciplinary work that is required to better understand all the complexities of tropical forests.
Thank you, Anna. Is somebody else want to answer that or?
Yeah, for me, actually, previously I was not thinking to do the tropical things specifically, but it is kind of coincident that I'm just testing this tropical forest in Nepal to refine my methodology. So I want to upscale to the global level in the future. But currently, I chose the Nepal's Tarai Arc landscape, and I found a lot of challenges of accessing the data. And for example, if I want to run some training data for some machine learning approach or something like that, other complex modeling approach, so I don't have data for that particular result. So I'm facing more challenges in accessing data, but I have no people involved in my research. But yeah, also there is very narrow stretch of tropical forest in Nepal. So I'm not sure if my research result reflects to the world's tropical forestry things, but yeah, I'm now more curious to tropical forest behavior with the drought specifically. So in the future, I hope even if not only in the tropical forest, I will be able to find out and group the forest including tropical forest. So yeah, I'll not have difficulties accessing data. Yeah, thank you.
I
Thank you,
also,
Gina.
sorry, I also want to include something.
Mhm.
I think I agree with you that are really complex system to study. Like in one place, you can find different type of forest, like in a really small area, which actually is also amazing. So you have the opportunity to learn a lot, but you really have to pay attention of which species that you are studying there, because they can be really complex and diverse. Some places can be kind of isolate, so you need to have to build like good relation with the communities to be in those places, because some of them are really difficult to access. For the conditions, it's not always easy to be there. Yeah, and sometimes the weather can be a little bit challenging, the temperature, the pests or the insects, but there are things that you learn through the path. Also, with the communities, sometimes there are some barriers if your language is different, if your customs are different, but also you are going to learn from them and to adapt yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. There is a question in the chat that I think that Danny already answered. That is from Kripa Neupane. Question to Danny, it says, when you say tree planting, are you looking for any specific tree species or trees in general? Also, did you not include gender in your model? I don't know if you already answered, Danny. And there
I
is
did
another
not.
thing. And then also Kripa asked, and what is the maximum amount of landowners were willing to accept if you analyze this part?
Yeah, no, thank you for both of those questions. So yes, these are the tree species that were in the first year of this NGO program. And I think one of the challenges of this study is we broke these into crude categories of fruit, medicinal, and timber. But for instance, medicinal trees, sometimes they can have fruits as well, that are used for medicinal purposes. And sometimes, for instance, with neem, they can be cut down as a poor type of timber, or a timber that's less valuable, I should say. So we did present farmers with what they would be getting in each of these bundles. And we learned later and after the study that when farmers were receiving real trees, that they sometimes had reactions to specific tree species. For instance, in Sri Lanka, we heard that some farmers thought that teak attracted elephants. We never heard that in this study area, but another one of my colleagues heard that. And then in this area, we found that some farmers thought that Malabar neem would attract elephants. So there are these, I think that to echo what others have said, one of the challenging things about working with tropical forests is the sheer complexity of both the people that are and how varied they are in terms of what they want, what they're doing, who live adjacent to tropical forests, and then the forests themselves. And so talking about something like tree planting, you can very quickly, you want to make generalizations, you want to be able to model, but then there are so many details that are salient. In terms of gender, we found something kind of interesting, which is we made sure that as an eligibility requirement that the person that was answering our stated choice experiment was considered the primary land caretaker or primary land manager. And that ruled out almost all women. We had 397 of our 400 respondents were men. In the surveys that went afterwards to people that actually received tree planting, then we had about 20% women, and that changed. And so we can analyze the variable in that context. But we know, for instance, that women are involved in household decisions, partly because in some of the cases where people rejected trees, they say, well, I talked to my wife and she said, we're not doing it. But in our stated choice experiment, we can't see whether or not women have different preferences than men because of that eligibility requirement. And finally, in terms of the experiment itself, the minimum amount of trees that the NGO was willing to give farmers was 100 trees, and that was kind of their ideal to give to different people. And so we fixed that as the amount of trees that people would receive, and we varied different other things about the offers when we were testing preferences. But then in the actual intervention, we had some farmers that took up to 1,000 trees, and those typically had more land. And so in this literature, you see that people with more land and resources, they tend to be the ones that are able to plant more trees, which is another question about equality, especially if these programs are subsidized by public funds and then have things like carbon payments that could make people better off. Thanks.
Thank you, Danny. Also, Jimmy was interested to like know if this is a work that is already published, and Danny said that it will be published next week, so pretty soon. There is a question also for Sheila from Mayo Lakidara. Mayo asked, once we have identified high-risk ecological zones that experience a recent drought, how should we manage them to make sure they build up resilience? With the advancement of climate change, do you think that more and more forests in Nepal will become high-risk ecological zones, Sheila?
Yeah, thank you so much, Maggie. Yeah. Yeah, once we know the high risk ecological zone, if it is in drier site already, so we can manage the forest by thinning to make it like moderate tree cover density, so that it will decrease the resilience.
Thank you, Sheila. There is another question that states that as people who are you guys, that you are still building your career in tropical forest, what are some aspects that you consider important to keep in mind? What are things that you grab in building your career and your credibility as forest scientist? To anyone who wants to answer.
I think for me personally, I'm not only considering tropical forestry career, to be honest, because I'm using mostly remote sensing data, which allows me to upscale my study in other forest regions as well. So I'm actually interested in comparing the function and traits in different kind of like region, including tropical and comparing with the other region as well. So yeah, making more yeah, I don't know the explicit answer, but yeah, I'm still exploring and I'm early in my study, so I have not decided yet my career, but yeah, that's what I can say. I will extend my scope beyond the tropical forest. Yeah, that's for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila.
Like, for example, in my case that I'm working with people, I think that build trust is really important. So to do what we are going to do, what you say that you are going to do, like always be honest on that path. It's also important.
Thank you. There is also a question for Anna from Sheila. Do you think that Red Plus is viable for the long term, Anna?
Wow. I think that is a question that I have thought a lot of times. As I show in the presentation, it started it was first proposed in 2005 with the potential of doing many things, but like after more like a decade or even 2 decades, we are still seeing many challenges, many complexities. My personal opinion about REDD and carbon markets in general is that it can be a very powerful tool to address many things, climate change mitigation, forest protection, and benefits to local communities. It is not working as expected, but I think it is what we have right now. So we, as a researchers, should use what we have and try to do research to provide recommendations to improve what we already have. So I am hopeful about REDD and forest carbon markets in general. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, Danny.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that? We had Erin in here before, and she was part of one of those studies that I think rightfully called into question the validity of REDD in terms of having additionality or not. My question to you, and I guess all of you, is what is our responsibility as scientists and researchers to both tell the truth but also think about the implications of our work in terms of the impact it can have longer term and the ability to have to do interventions like REDD+, because I think that that market has, as my understanding, as a result of the Guardian papers and the Guardian reports and that paper and several of those papers, the price has fallen apart, and so now it's a harder future for REDD.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a sense?
Well, many people during my fieldwork, I mean, I did interviews in 3 countries, and one of my questions to key stakeholders in REDD was, what do you think should be changed or improved for REDD? And one of the most frequently mentioned response was that the framework of REDD should not be a voluntary market. I mean, that it needs to be a what is the word? Compliance market. So basically, people who pollute should be obligated to pay if they are emitting. I mean, it shouldn't be something I just pay if I want or if I can. There should be some laws, some regulations at national, international level that makes those payments mandatory. And also there should be better, greener practices to move, like, for example, industries that are polluting a lot. They should improve the practices. It's not only, I pay, but I keep polluting. I mean, that shouldn't be the idea. So it has to do a lot with policies and regulations at international level that should be implemented in these cases. But yeah, I agree. There are like many a lot of work and peer review showing that there are still many challenges to be considered. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Anna. Is there any more questions for the speakers? No?
I would jump in quickly just to go back to Anna and Danny's point. I think that it's really, really hard to know how public media is going to grasp on your article. So if we think about like the Bastin et al. Paper with the global reforestation, and then what everybody took from that was we should plant 1 trillion trees, which hadn't actually been their main recommendation, right? But that's what people take from it. And then same from this recent Guardian articles and all of those that like, oh, these carbon markets are all flawed. So I think that is really tricky. I think we also don't really, as scientists, have much training in dealing with media and like thinking that through. So I do think that that's a really good point. Not that we should be censoring ourselves, but we should be perhaps have a little more training in anticipating how is this going to be interpreted more broadly if we are working on hot button issues like reforestation, carbon, climate change, these sorts of things. because I know, you know, for the Beston article, I know some of the authors and they were really unprepared for the firestorm that came after that. So it's tricky, but I think it's really good to think about.
Thank you,
And-
Meredith.
Can we ask everybody to turn on their cameras if they can, and we will get a group shot of who's here? Anybody else could turn on their camera? We can get a group shot. Good. Oh, good. Okay. Ah, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. That was great information. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dawn. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sheila, for an ISTF Global for helping organize this webinar. Thank you, ISTF in NC State. And thank you, everybody that joined to this webinar. So thank you so much. And hopefully we will see each other again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentations.
Good job.
Sheila, thank you so much, Sheila.
Thank you.
Good. It worked pretty well, I think. I think that went really well. And you had good questions and discussions there to wrap up at the end. So I would say éxito completo.
Thank you, Sheila. Awesome.
Thank you for helping us coordinating it.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. And if you want to do something again, you know, in 2 months, I don't care. You know, we're always
Maybe next semester, Sheila, we do another one. I don't know. Mayo.
Come here, Mayo.
Thank you
Okay,
so
well-
much.
Well, thanks, guys. It really helps us also we're starting to try to get the chapters doing more too. So this is great. Okay, well, have a
Yeah.
good rest of the day then,
You
okay?
too. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.